AJ, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Parker?
Good. I feel like we just spent the last 20 minutes just asking each other if you could hear us, if you could hear me.
I can hear you now.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I wanted to bring you on here because you know we're in business together, but you've been one of my mentors on the investing side of things, and you do something really creative called BRRRRing. And I think the general public needs to know more about this method of investing because it's very, very creative, and it's a way to build a quick portfolio of properties very quickly. Um,
Yes,
I'd
indeed.
love to, yeah, just lead the way. I'd love to hear your story about how you got into it. For the record, you're almost in double-digit properties in just a couple of years, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so we kind of stumbled on it, to be honest. It's me and my older brother Josh that do it together. We bought the first one, and we were just making offers. We didn't really have any intention of doing the whole remodel thing necessarily off the bat. Um, we made like six offers and lost six consecutive times in multiple offers, and we were like, all right, well, we'll just keep rolling. And the first one we ended up actually getting was because they had a bunch of city required repairs. And so when I went and showed it, I thought they had recently finished the basement and that the shower was draining into the floor drain, which made me, realize that this property probably wasn't going to pass through that city inspection that they hadn't had yet. So we actually lost in multiple offers on that property. And I told the agent when the city inspection comes back really bad that he should call me back. And he actually did. So we ended up purchasing it at a pretty big discount because we took on about $20,000 worth of repairs that the city was requiring us to do because the basement was done with no permit. So we ripped the whole bathroom out down there, ripped out a bunch of the floor covering, and added some walls and stuff like that. Didn't end up doing a massive project. It was probably a $30,000 project, but we've now refinanced that property twice. So worked out pretty well.
So you just got into it with your brother, just expecting to start compiling some rental properties. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, exactly. Like we weren't like, let's do this whole buy them and do these crazy renovations and then refinance them and cash out on them, and necessarily at the outset. And then we realized the first one actually gave us the idea of the city required repair angle, where I know the folks in St. Louis Park really well. I know that program really well, and a lot of those repairs they're pretty incidental to a big project. So and we buy property that's a little bit distressed, that first time buyers probably aren't going to want to do the escrows and take on all these repairs themselves. So for sellers, it's a huge value add for us to go, yeah, don't worry about it, just have the inspector come out. We'll take on whatever they come back with.
Sure. I think that's one of the things that keeps most people away from investing in real estate is the fear of what they're going to have to do to the property to maintain it, but also just lacking that knowledge of getting into it and knowing the things that you need to do to bring it back up to the standard that renters require and laws require. So how did you acquire those skills? I mean, obviously selling real estate gives you a kind of an in because we see a lot of stuff in this business, but
Mm-hmm.
explain to me how you got to that point or how you got to this point now.
Yeah, I kind of learned most of it just by doing it, to be honest. So my wife and I's first home in St. Louis Park, I general contracted the whole basement. I actually did all of the work for a bathroom. So I did all the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, sheetrock, tile, the whole bit, just because I wanted to learn how to do it. It was a pain in the butt, but I figured it out. And then just being there with those city inspectors, as they walked through and pointed stuff out that would be required on different sorts of projects. We then went on and did our kitchen at that house, and then we rolled right into that project, our first property, where I learned a lot of those different nuances that I'd want to know. And like you said, a lot of people don't get into it because they're worried about getting phone calls or having problems with the property. And often, and now that I know how to do a lot of like the small fixes, it's not a big deal. And often we don't get that many calls just because with the renovation strategy that we've kind of deployed, we end up swapping out a lot of the plumbing. We end up swapping out a lot of the electrical. Often we do new furnace and AC. So we don't get, as many calls as we probably would if we were just, buying old property and then just sticking tenants in them.
For sure. Yeah, and that's one of the huge advantages to this investment strategy. explain, which, you know, it's a good point. What is BRRRR? What is, you and I had a little discrepancy on how many R's we should use, but are we on the same page now?
So yeah, I think so. So buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and Parker's favorite fourth, repeat, which we've done a few times now. So, and it's not always like those first two properties we bought, we didn't do that big remodel. We didn't, you know, have that strategy going in, but now we've got some equity just because the markets we're in the last 2.5 years have gone up 10% a year. So there's room to pull money from different properties in that way. But yeah, 6 of our last 7 purchases, we've done the BRRRR strategy. You can't cash out for 6 months, but basically you're just, if you do it right, you're recycling a lot of the money that you put into it up front. So it ends up working out okay. I found a bank that would work with me and they let me manage the project. So I don't need to have a general contractor sign off. So I manage all my own subs. My wife does a lot of the design, and then along with my brother and his wife, we kind of make a decent team in making decisions on what we're going to be doing with each project.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about the different strategies with investing in real estate. So you can, of course, just buy a house, put a renter in it, and just rent it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, totally. And we've done that. The tough part is that getting into investing in real estate is an uphill battle. If you're, I mean, there's one really great way to get into it to start, which I've actually represented a lot of clients on. And my younger brother, Luke, actually just did, which is you buy a multi-family property with a low down payment, you live in part of it and you rent out the rest of it. So I've had a lot of people do that because the biggest hurdle to getting into investing in real estate is capital. I mean, if you don't have capital up front to put 20% down or 25% down on something, then you can't even get into the game. And it's like, how many times a year can you save 20 to 25% to buy another property, right? For most people, it's not that many. So, you know, you end up getting one and then you're waiting 2 years before you can buy another one, and it doesn't kind of scale as fast. So the way we've done it is, you know, we're buying a slightly distressed property. It probably doesn't make sense to flip because it's not going to hit the after rehab values that a flipper would normally look for, but it's approaching that and getting close. And so the flippers don't really want it. First time home buyers are the other buyer really in the marketplace that we're buying in. And they don't want it because it's in crappy condition. The city wants them to fix a bunch of stuff. So we kind of come in this interim, and there's not a lot of people buying rental property in the St. Louis Park area where we are for single family homes. So we sit right in the middle there. You know, we may put down 20% up front, but we might get 10 to 15 of it back when we refinance. And at that point, we've made that money back on cash flow a lot of the time. So it's a pretty cool way to do it.
You nailed it. So your first investment property is always the hardest one to buy, right? Similar to your first house that you buy. The reason being is you need to save up that cash to put it into the house. So as you mentioned as well, you know, waiting 2-3 years to do this over and over is one strategy, right? There's nothing wrong about that. It's a safer, slower strategy. But what you're doing and what BRRRR is you're taking money, you're fixing them up, you're refinancing and sucking that cash out of the property, which I'd love for you to kind of expand on, because if the numbers make sense, you can almost renovate these properties for free, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so a lot of this too came out of just talking with a mentor of mine in the real estate investing space. So before I got into it, me and Josh met with him several times to kind of talk through it. And his big thing, he's always talks about having more and more leverage. And he's slightly riskier even than me, and I consider myself pretty risky. So he does he's done some crazy things in the past to lever up as much as possible. But kind of on that topic, like the access to the equity is the biggest way that you can scale fast, because you have to find a way to not only create the equity, but be buying in an area that's appreciating, and stick renters in there that you're still getting cash flow. So our strategy is somewhere in the middle, like I mentioned. So we're not always looking for like the free property necessarily, but we're looking for that, like, you know, if you're putting $50,000 into a $250,000 home, on the back end, we've got to have it worth like $350 for it to make sense for us, so that we've built in that $50,000 of equity, so that if I cash out and I get a loan for $280,000 on that $350,000 valuation, I might only be into the property for 5 or 10% at that point, because my initial investment has gotten pretty much paid back. So my 60 grand of the 250 plus 50, if you're following me, 20% down on that, plus the closing costs, I might get 40 or 50 of that back when I do the cash out. And then the cash on cash returns get to look really ridiculous, So we've been posting cash on cash returns of like 30 to 35% on most of our properties, which seems crazy, but the big reason why is because we get so much of that equity back that the actual cash in, the cash position in isn't really that high. And the area we're in has a lot of renters that are willing to pay a super high premium for very, very nice property. So we end up doing okay on the cash flow side.
So yeah, so if somebody wanted to look for a property to invest in or to BRRRR, let's say you have, and you're going to move into a market. What do you recommend? Taking that $50,000, how do you turn that into 5 homes?
Yeah, I wish I had the magic answer to that question.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you've got to find that property that's, if that's how you're going to do it, and you're just going to start with one kind of like big chunk of 50 grand, and you don't want to add any more money into it. You've got to find the first property's got to kind of knock it out of the park. So we have one property that we did that with, and it was an off-market property. Typically, that's the best way to find a property that, is really distressed. Like, we found a place on Craigslist. There's no kitchen or bath, like the bathroom's ripped out. And it's like, this he's on Craigslist only. He's not going to really be able to get rid of this. It's in terrible condition. It's smoky and all of that. So we ended up getting a great deal where, we put in, I think, like 60 grand or 70 grand up front, and we got like 60 back on the back end. So we've only spent 10,000 at that point. And the rent is, I think, 2,500, and the payment's like 1,600. So crazy example, but I mean, you're talking 9,000, trying to think, be about 10,000 a year in return. So we're actually posting like 100% return on that property.
Yeah.
Which again, it's atypical, but I think it's a good way where you're not just going, okay, I have 50 grand. I'm going to go buy a $250,000 4-bedroom home in so-and-so city. And then I'm just going to wait until either I've saved up enough money or I've made enough cash flow to make this make sense to do it again. Because that's just a really slow grind way to do it. And I think, I mean, to be totally honest, me and Josh lucked out a lot. He sent me a screenshot from one of our last appraisals, and he said the price appreciation in St. Louis Park looks like a hockey stick. I was like, yeah. He's like, I think we bought in at the right time. So I mean, when we got into the market, it just really shot up. So building in 10% by remodeling, but then getting another 10% just by sitting there, it obviously is helpful as well.
Sure. So somebody out there who's thinking, hey, I might want to do this, or I might want to save up money and go down this road. You have to look for properties that are in highly desirable areas. Number one, insulated by something such as St. Louis Park is, one of the closest suburbs to Minneapolis, right? I mean, it's got great schools, it's got great bars, nightlife, everything. So you're looking for things that are going to insulate that value so that rents stay high and they continue to go up through time, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I think and it depends what your strategy is as far as your renovations too. I mean, if you're like us, we're putting in crazy cool backsplashes and farmhouse sinks and open shelving and stuff like that, because I know that the people that are going to want to spend $3,000 for a 4-bedroom house are going to be wowed by those sorts of things. And so we kind of gear our remodeling towards the tenant that we think we're going to get. So to your point, I mean, the on the cash flow side of things, the rents start to get a lot more attractive when you're in areas with, like you said, nightlife, access to Minneapolis, other cities that have fun stuff going on, schools, stuff like that. So yeah, you definitely want to be in a desirable area. But I think if you're just starting, one thing for me is being accessible to where I live. So I live in Minnetonka, and so the first property is 10 minutes door to door, and the last property is 16 minutes door to door. So with 2 little kids and my wife, and we're not trying to drive over to St. Paul to, go check on a furnace that's not working. So the proximity to where I live and the proximity to each other, I think, is also important. So I always encourage people to have a long-term strategy, and not just go, where's my first property? But think about this as like, if I want 10 properties, could I find 10 in this area that would make sense with this strategy?
Sure. That's great advice. Another negative to rental properties that I hear from the public or from clients from time to time is, I don't want to manage these things. I don't want to manage the people. I don't want to get the calls. I mean, with almost 10, you have like 9 properties, right? 10 properties. With that many properties, how many calls are you getting? Like, how much management are you actually doing? Be completely honest with us.
Yeah. So for a while there, none. I mean, we had, when the furnace was kicked on, we got like 2 or 3 calls, but most of that, the nice thing about what we're doing is, we're redoing a property right now that we just closed on like a couple weeks ago. So my HVAC guy, he's already bidding out that project. I've given him, 6 other projects, so he's happy. Electrician's happy, general contractor's happy. When stuff comes up at other properties and I'm like, hey, you remember this house? The furnace isn't working. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll be over there tomorrow. Boom, on the spot, because he knows I'm one of his best customers. And so I probably get 1 to 2 calls a week. At the most. I mean, the furnaces were a problem. We've had some drain problems. I just call Ron the sewer rat and they take care of it for me. I had one of the bedrooms wasn't getting warm, but I think it was because the tenant had the dresser in front of the supplies. I just moved the dresser. So stuff comes up that, and I enjoy fixing things. So some of it I can fix myself, but it's okay, this breaker won't hold, and I fix it, and then it does it again. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call the electrician because I'm not gonna, deal with that kind of stuff. But the management's really not that complicated, especially with 2 people. I mean, my brother does all the books. He makes sure that all the payments come in on time. He manages all that communication, and I manage all of the hands-on organizing, getting people to a property if something's wrong.
Sure. Well, yeah, and getting paid is the other thing. Nowadays, it's easy to get paid. We have Venmo, we have Apple Pay, we have, every bank can set up direct deposits. I mean, the days of paper checks are over. And if I don't see that notification come through for my rentals, the first thing I'm doing is calling the renter saying, hey, what's up, right? And you can put a lot of those on auto. So at what point do you think you'd consider managing out? What number of properties do you think would be overwhelming to the point where it would interfere with your life?
I don't know if we're going to get to a point where we'll want to do that necessarily. I don't know if we'd want to buy enough that we got to the spot where we thought that we could manage them ourselves, because I think we can get to a pretty healthy number and self-manage them. The big thing, obviously, is just time. So it's figuring out how to have the time to do it. But the pitch, I give a sales pitch to every tenant that I show a property that's, hey, I'm sure you've worked with so-and-so property management company before. I won't name anybody, but people have really bad experiences with property management companies all the time. And so speaking to that every time that I show a property, and then I go, by the way, this is my house. I fixed up all this stuff. Here's what we did in here. If anything goes wrong, I want you to call me immediately because it's my house and I want it fixed. And that tone is just so much different than what people are used to in property management. I mean, you hear stories of the furnace doesn't work and nobody shows up for 5 days. Nobody even responds for 5 days. And it's I'm hair on fire. Hey, HVAC guy, you got to get over there right now because we got to get this furnace working. It's 10 degrees outside. So kind of in that regard, I don't know if I really would want to hand that off to somebody. It's something that I enjoy doing and kind of having my hand in.
Sure. I mean, what is the long-term goal with these properties? I mean, do you have a certain amount that you want to get to? Do you and your brother talk about that kind of stuff, or are you're just accumulating them as you can?
Yeah, we'd like to get, I mean, he's ideally said, maybe 25-ish or so. I'd like to get 30 or 40 probably. And then kind of go from there and see what happens. The biggest thing for us is going to be continuing to find properties that work. As you may know, St. Louis Park's getting really expensive. So our initial purchase prices are creeping up, but we're realizing that we're probably under rented on a lot of our properties too. Since we rented our last few at some pretty big numbers just based on uptowns really blown up and everything's super expensive over there. So we get a lot of people that look there and then go, I'd rather not live in a duplex or a, luxury apartment. I'd rather have my own backyard and have bonfires and I got a dog and all that kind of stuff. So that's the real big crux though, is just, can we find enough properties in the area we're in, or are we going to have to go to Golden Valley or Hopkins or maybe into Minneapolis? I'm not super interested in doing that, but potentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So to review the BRRRR strategy, we're not just talking about buying rental properties and putting renters in there. So we've gone over how to buy them, what to look for. We've talked about renovations. One of the things I want to mention about that is that, like, AJ, you have incredible partners. It's very valuable to have people you can rely on. And that's not always the easiest thing. It's probably the number one thing that I hear from flippers is that they just can't stand these contractors. But you give them enough business, them like they're your friends. I mean,
a big thing for me too, to be honest, Parker, is I show up with a smile and it sounds so stupid and but those guys sometimes they're just grumpy. Like people, like a lot of homeowners yell at their contractors all the time. Like they're just not very friendly to them. People feel like they're having a bad experience with them, whatever. It's like you said, it's a common complaint of people. And so I show up and I'm happy. Like I give them a high five and I show up like, thanks for being here. Like this is turning out so cool, isn't it? Like, what do you think of this? And I also don't haggle over pricing ever. I never do. If I feel like it's fair, I literally won't say a word. Those guys don't want to get negotiated with 6 times a year with me.
Right.
They're not interested in that. So like, you just tell me a fair price. They say, how did the bid look? I said, do you think it's a fair price? And they say, yes. I say, fine. It looks great to me then. I don't need to, hover over you and knock you down because I know everybody else does that. And so if I want them to show up at my job, I don't haggle with them. I act excited that they're there. They're happier when they're there. They do better work. But like you said, I mean, they show up on time and when they say they're going to.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and you build that into your numbers too. So you don't have to haggle over $50, right?
Right.
Okay. So renovating, that does take skill. It takes patience. It takes a level of coordination for sure. I don't want to underplay that because it is challenging, but you're extremely good at it. Renting, right? So now you're finding a renter. Where do you advertise your rentals? How do you determine the rental price?
So we've and again, we have some super kind of unorthodox things that we do that we've just kind of learned work. We post them on Zillow, and which is pretty much what most people do. But the unorthodox things that we do, we made a push on Instagram like 6-8 months ago. We've got up to like 1,800 followers on there. And our big strategy there is to engage with people. So like Emily will post, my wife will post on the story and say, hey, we're thinking about this or that for the backsplash, this or that for the paint colors, this or that for whatever, and get people to vote and engage on our stuff. And then we've ended up with these people reaching out about the properties that we're posting about. So we'll post a picture of the framing in the basement and people will say, hey, I'm looking to rent a place over there. What's the details? And we've actually rented, kind of pseudo rented the last 2 properties before they were done. So they were being remodeled. The last one we did, it was a day after we bought it. They showed up and they were like, we've seen your work. We don't you just tell us what you're going to do in here. Like, we don't really care. Like, we'll rent it before it's done. So they signed the lease 3 months before they moved in. So we already had it rented out before we even swung a hammer, which was pretty neat. So that's like kind of the unorthodox way that we've done it is we have this kind of like a database where we can go, someone reaches out on Zillow even, I say, hey, check out our Instagram handle. Here it is. If you want to see our past projects, this is what they kind of look like. This is the quality, but this one's going to be, this theme. We always try to pick a different theme for every house so that we can keep the vibe, and not have a bunch of cookie cutter looking houses. So yeah. So, I mean, it's really just a combination of Zillow and Instagram, and posting on our personal pages too, to like Facebook and stuff to get people to get excited about it.
Personally, I found that Zillow gets really, really close on rents. I mean, they're pretty close, but the other thing you can do is post on Facebook, like Facebook Marketplace, and you will literally get a flood of people coming in. So you can set that rent a little bit higher and test it if you want. But you just, I mean, out of these 10 properties that you have, how many of them are like, how many of them do you have renters saying, hey, I want this so bad, where you have multiple people trying to rent the place? Or like
Yeah.
on our side of residential, multiple offers, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So with the way that we do it, just because we've learned from the city and from my real estate mentor, like, here's the way that you avoid any fair housing problems. Like, follow the rules to a T. You can only take, like, really have one person applying at a time. So we just do like a first in line system. They put down a deposit, they're first in line, right? But we do have people that have been like, has anyone done that yet? I want to put my deposit down. The last property is a great example. Like I said, we closed on it the next day. I had two people that wanted to see it, and they both wanted to rent it. And one group put down their deposit before the other group. And so then they applied and they were qualified. So they got to be the renter. But yeah, I mean, it does happen. It happens a lot less on the existing stuff than it does like when we have a turnover than it does on the new properties. Like, people just get a little bit excited about a construction project. Everyone loves HGTV, So
yeah,
it's like everyone really digs when we are doing cool construction projects.
for sure. All right. So you put the renter in the property. Now, probably the most confusing part to everybody watching this, and certainly to me when I got into it, was the process of refinancing and taking your cash out. Can you jump into that a little bit?
Yeah.
If
So
you're
the
gonna.
cash, yeah, no, totally. So the cash goes in at a down payment on the purchase price plus the construction on the front end. Then the bank is essentially funding all of the construction that happens on the property, assuming the post appraisal is greater than that number. If it's not greater than that number, then you really picked a bad property. It should be significantly greater. So then on the back end, you on a conventional market, in the conventional market, you got to wait 6 months to refinance that property with Fannie Mae. But you can get a 75-25, so 75% loan to value, 25% equity loan after 6 months. So after 6 months, so we do a 3-month project usually. We put the renter in. We pay the construction bank for another 3 months, and then right at the 6 month date, we've been locking our rate in for a 30-year fixed loan. We had the appraiser go out to the property. For us, it's been, again, 6 months, so it's up 5% probably, just because that's what the market's been doing. We've built in our 10 or whatever. And so when we cash out, it's usually something like 10% cash into the property at the value we're at. 15% we've just we've made on appreciation, or we've built in through the construction, and then 75% is financed by the bank. So we end up getting back kind of the difference of whatever loan value we're at after drawing up all of the construction and the new loan amount. So if we get a higher valuation, we get a higher loan amount. We get whatever that spread is.
So you're taking a construction loan, number one, and that's something that we don't necessarily need to get into, but there is an advantage to doing that. The disadvantage is you have to send all your work orders and receipts to the title company while you're doing it, correct? To release that money?
Correct.
Okay. Which really isn't an inconvenience if you have your organization in order.
Dropbox.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. So when you're buying these properties, what is the ratio that you're looking for proportion of, I guess ARV versus purchase price? I mean, what is there a split or a number percentage that you're looking for there?
Yeah, like I said, I think flippers typically are looking for like 30%. If I can get 15 in equity, like if I can create 15 or even 10 in equity, I'm making money. So if the future value is 350 and it takes me 315 to get to it, that's kind of our current property that we're doing. It's not like it's knocking out of the park, but I mean, I made 35,000 in equity just by doing a project, basically. Yeah. And then I get a lot of that. I end up getting a lot of that money back on the back end when I do my post value loan. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Again, I don't want to compete, especially when stuff's on the market. I don't want to compete with a flipper. I'm not really interested in doing that. And I don't want to compete with a first time buyer. I want to sit in the middle where no one else is really playing. And most of the time we throw our offer in and then we just say, yeah, just you can do what you want to do with this. But, we're going to close quick. We're not going to make you fix anything. We're not going to do an inspection. Like, I don't need any of this stuff. you just tell me when you're ready to accept that offer, because I know that's a property that there's just not a very big market for.
Nice, nice. All right, so you put the renter in the property, 6 months goes by, you refinance it, you get your cash out. What do you do next?
This your repeat that you wanted to go for?
Well, I mean, that's how
Yeah.
you're going to build a portfolio of properties fairly quickly.
Yeah, totally. And that is what kind of gets it off the ground. I mean, like I said, the access to capital is what the hardest thing is to get into this. And once you get to a certain level, and we're really not quite there yet, but you start talking about people with 30, 40 properties, if they're all cash flowing $700 a month, you're making a pretty penny every month just on owning the rental property. So the access to capital and the ease of buying the next property, obviously is a lot better when you're making tens of thousands of dollars every month in just cash flow. So yeah, the repeat is important. I think just like pushing forward all the time and using that leverage as much as possible has been really, really vital to what we're doing. But we're also, not losing sight of the cash flow. I think a lot of investors are like just pulling so much equity out that their cash flow position gets, deteriorated to the point where if they had a vacancy, they might be in trouble. Whereas we're still middle of the ground on cash flow. A lot of our properties are making a really good cash flow every month, which sometimes means that the cash out wasn't as good. Like we didn't get as good of a valuation on the back end, and that's okay. Because we got a nice mix of properties that are, a nice blend that doesn't make us completely lopsided.
Sure. Yeah, that's smart. And one of the comments I get from investors, savvy investors who may not be in the real estate space is what happens in a down market to these properties? I mean, what happens to somebody that has 20 properties in a down market with this strategy?
Yeah, right. I mean, for us, that's the big reason for the cash flow. So like if I'm making like some of these properties we're making $1,000 a month on, right? Like if I drop my rent by $500, that will be a stampede through the front door to rent that place, regardless of the market. Because for one, I've got the nicest single family home on the that's available. So like if I post a 4-bedroom, 3-bath for 2,500 and it's 2,000 square feet in St. Louis Park, it would be calamity. Like it would just like people would freak out. And so I know that I've got that room to buffer it down. And two, like some people say in the down markets that the vacancy can get even tighter because not as many people are purchasing properties. So all of this, I can get deep into the economics of things because I'm into that too. But all of this like movement that's happening in our economy, some political instability and all this kinds of crazy things that are happening in our world. I mean, they could be making things better for landlords, to be honest. So the way we've been moving since the recession in 08, 09 has made people stay in their homes longer. The average age of a buyer is older. People are waiting longer to get married. They're waiting longer to have kids. So owning rental property has, I think, become more profitable because the renter pool is so much bigger than it used to be.
That's a great point. Yeah, those are all great points. What did you do before this, AJ?
Before investing in real estate or before real estate in general?
Yeah, before real estate.
So I played baseball for in the Twins organization from 2011 until 2014.
You think your competitiveness plays a factor in what you're doing today?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, and I was I don't know. I mean, through sports, I was always undersized, and kind of the expectations weren't always that high for me. So being competitive in that way was important, and having the ability to just take a lot of risk was vital to success in baseball. And it's kind of the same thing. It translates really nicely into real estate and real estate investing.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be big if you have a big brain, right?
In sports, you do.
I want to wrap up here, and of course, I'm grateful for the time. Every time we talk about this stuff, it inspires me. When you taught me this, I went out and bought a property, and that was cool. And you've been down there to visit the property to help me with it, and It's not easy, that's for sure. But with anything in life, the more times you do it, the better you get and the more seasoned you become. And, that's what's cool about it. But so to wrap this up, how many homes are you going to sell this year, AJ?
Gonna sell?
Yeah, on the residential side.
I don't know. I could get a couple more. I'm at 55 right now.
Oh, personally, how about your team?
160.
God, I love it. So you're 30 years old. You're sitting here on 10 rental properties. You're gonna have 30 by the time you're my age, and you're selling a couple hundred homes a year. It's pretty good. Pretty good deal.
It's fun, man. It's a wild ride.
I love being connected with you, man. I appreciate the time. Man, I learn something from you every single time we talk. So I love it. But the last thing is, you mentioned Instagram. You're at Honey Brothers, correct?
Yep, we're the Honey Brothers.
The Honey Brothers. So like that farmhouse style sink you mentioned, go on there and see it, and all the other stuff you guys do, which is cool. Appreciate the time, AJ. I'll let you get back to your family.
Yeah, thank you, Parker. Have a good one.
See you, dude.
See ya.